All right, well, welcome everyone to heat pump deployment and electric construction, a data-driven approach to building electrification. Now, I always get excited when the EIA or Energy Information Administration releases their typically every 5 year data on buildings. There's a ton of data in there on features of our homes where we live and our buildings, and their location. And ultimately, it's looking at how much energy is being used, where that energy is coming from, and what's making up that energy. So I always get excited to kind of take a look at that, dissect that kind of information. However, there's a lot of details there. And so that's why I'm really excited about this session here today, where we're going to be having an entity who's actually taken a look at some of this and made sense of it all from the context of heat pumps, both for residential and commercial data. So I assume that will, also include multifamily. But before we get started, we do need to do our membership spotlight for the month. As a new allied partner of the Building Performance Association, we wanted to highlight one of our members to raise awareness about energy efficiency professionals. If you have yet to follow Marcy Cleveland on LinkedIn, ensure you do. She's a thought leader in home improvements and updates for sustainability. And so it's exciting to see she was recently featured as part of their Millions of Energy Efficiency Professionals highlights across the country. This is who Green Home Institute members are. This is what Green Home Institute members do. And so can you. Go to greenhomeinstitute.org and /become a member and learn more. Also, we want to thank our top tier gold sponsor, Build Equinox. They feature the Serve 2 for homes and the Serve 1000 for schools. These devices are energy recovery ventilators that keep fresh air coming, but they have integrated heat pumps to ensure maximum comfort. They're also demand-controlled smart ventilation, which detects poor air quality and only ventilates as needed, saving energy and reducing overventilation. You can learn more both about the Serve 2 and the Serve 1000 over at buildequinox.com. So again, welcome everyone to Heat Pump Deployment and Electric Construction, a data-driven approach to building electrification. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the education manager here. This course, like all others, is approved for multiple continuing education units, including 2 pillars within our Certified Green Home Professional designation under Energy Health. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design contractor license. Look for that Passive House 5-digit code at the end of this session. It'll be listed on your certificate or in the follow-up email. So with that, I am excited to hand it off to our speakers here today, Kat and Stephen from the Atlas building, to talk a little bit more about them and the organization. So, Kat, Stephen, please take it away.
Thanks, Brett. I'm like he said, I'm Stephen Naimoli. I am a policy analyst at Atlas Public Policy, and my colleague Kat is with us as well. If you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Hi, my name is Kat. I'm a policy associate at Atlas. I support Stephen's work on the Buildings Hub. We hope you enjoy this presentation and check out the tool.
Absolutely. So I will share my screen to get us started. There we go. So welcome to our presentation. I am going to, here we go, get us started. So first, a little bit about Atlas Public Policy. We are a policy and data research firm established in 2015. We're based in Washington, D.C. Atlas Public Policy equips businesses and policymakers to make strategic, informed decisions that serve the public interest. We build analytical tools and dashboards using powerful, accessible technology and offer expert advisory services to tackle the pressing issues of the day. Our key work areas currently include transportation and building electrification, climate policy, water policy, and disinformation tracking. At Atlas, I manage the Buildings Hub, which is a one-stop shop for data, news, and policies on building electrification and decarbonization. The hub pulls together a range of complex and widely available market, policy, and technical data sets that complement and inform one another. The breadth of data available on the Buildings Hub was designed to overcome the disaggregated nature of existing data sets. With valuable data in hand, users are empowered to advance the decarbonization of buildings and deploy best practices. Now, as Brett said, we'll be looking at data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration's 2020 Residential Energy Consumption Survey and 2018 Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey. And we're going to focus really on four major thematic areas: all electric buildings, space heating, water heating, and cooking. So to start out, with all electric buildings, there are, as of the 2020 survey, there are about 31 million all-electric homes in the United States. That is about 25% of homes. This map shows kind of from light green to dark green the percentage of households that are all electric in these states. The biggest concentrations, as you'll notice, are really in the South, the Southeast particularly, and Hawaii. The states with the largest share of all electric households are four of the five are all in the South, and then the fifth, of course, being Hawaii. The states where there is the smallest share are not quite as geographically concentrated in the same way. We have three northeastern states, one in the Midwest and one in the Southwest. In terms of commercial buildings, we have somewhat of a similar kind of trend here. 33% of commercial buildings in the South are all electric, and then the West, Northeast, and Midwest, kind of in that order in terms of the percent of buildings. Now, in terms of space heating, the number of homes heated primarily by electricity has generally increased over time, rising from 23 million homes in 2005, which was about 21% of the homes, to 43 million, which was 34% in 2020. You'll see that in general, we have some like upward trends among all of these regions, with the exception of the Midwest, where there is a little bit of a leveling off here compared to Southwest and Northeast. And we will kind of dig into that a little bit more in the next couple of slides in terms of you'll see that quite starkly here. Particularly here with the residential space heating by fuel in 2020, there are some pretty stark differences among the regions. Almost every region in the country is heated primarily with gas, and the Midwest, like I was just saying, stands out at 70%. Notably, though, 19% of households in the Northeast are heated with fuel oil, thanks to some kind of odd historical peculiarities, policies in the past and sort of market inertia over time. And it's also the only region where fuel oil heats more than 1% of households. It's the only region where we see a kind of, I would say, a significant penetration of fuel oil for space heating. Propane is another somewhat regional fuel here in that it heats 8% of Midwest homes compared to 3 to 4% of other regions. Now, I haven't mentioned yet, kind of the specific percentages of electricity here. You can see it's generally the number 2 fuel for most regions for space heating. 55% of homes in the South are heated with electricity. And you'll see that there is a not insignificant portion in the West, the South, that don't have heating at all in their homes. That is, as you might expect, not the case for the Northeast. It is a pretty small proportion of homes do not have heating in their homes in the Northeast. So digging into households that are heated with electricity, wanted to highlight a little bit of the kind of distribution by equipment. Central furnaces and built-in electric units, electric resistance, are very common, as I'm sure everyone is quite aware. But there are places where we're seeing heat pumps really, even a few years ago, really kind of take a lot of precedence. So the South, in particular, 49% of homes that are heated with electricity in the South are heated with heat pumps. Central heat pumps, and then another 2% with mini split heat pumps. So essentially about half. And then while it is not necessarily the number one equipment in other regions, 23% in the West, 21% in the Midwest, 20% in the Northeast, not an insignificant percentage of households heating with electricity use central heat pumps, and mini splits kind of fill in an additional 2 to 6% here as well. And a lot of that, particularly if you look at the Northeast, for example, a lot of that is driven, the mini splits are driven just by, what homes are we retrofitting? Is it easier to, for example, if there are homes with radiators and hydronic systems, to replace them with a ductless system rather than adding ductwork, which is more expensive, more invasive, etc. And I do not have a slide here on kind of what the breakdown of heat pumps is for residential homes, but on the Atlas Buildings Hub, we do note from EIA data that about 86% of heat pumps, of households with heat pumps in the US, are heated with central air source heat pumps. And then another 6 to 7% are ground source, and 8% are mini splits.
Stephen, real quick, 2 quick questions on that last chart.
Yeah.
And you were kind of hinting at it on the replacement of like radiator systems with mini splits. Do you get a sense for does this go down even further where is this the main heating source, or can you also look at secondary? Because I guess it does say primary, but is there also a lot of homes, are the mini splits picking up also as a secondary source of heat? Is there any data on that?
There is. I regretfully don't have it in the presentation, but that is something that EIA makes available that we account for on Buildings Hub as well. So
okay.
I'd be happy to follow up with anyone with additional information on that.
And are they tracking how much of these are adding backup resistant strip heat to them, or induct heating or anything like that?
That is a good question. I would say that is another one where I don't know off the top of my head, but the EIA data does get pretty into there are a lot of questions on their surveys. They get into quite a bit into the weeds, and so I do believe that they account for some of those.
Okay.
So getting into looking specifically at heat pump deployment in homes, across the states, wanted to highlight here some of the top 4 states and the bottom 5 states for heat pump deployment. Nationally, excuse me, I'm a little nationally, they're about 14% of homes primarily heat their homes with heat pumps. The 4 states where heat pumps heat the largest proportion are South Carolina, Alabama, North Carolina, and Florida. Again, you'll note that these are all 4 in the South, kind of like we were seeing before with some of these other trends as well. The states with the smallest shares, kind of much like the all electric, they're not quite as geographically concentrated as the top states are. Alaska and Hawaii and Wyoming are classified as in the West. Colorado as well, Wisconsin in the Midwest. But you'll note that 4 of these states are in cold climates. And noting again that this data is from 2020, until fairly recently, heat pumps had a reputation for not working as well in cold climates. And so we'll likely see a lot more deployments in these states in the future, particularly since noting Wisconsin is one of the only states that has launched its home energy rebate program under U.S. Department of Energy's home energy rebates established by the Inflation Reduction Act. So particularly as yes, claps for that. Particularly as we have gotten better cold climate heat pump technology, and as we're getting better at communicating the benefits of heat pumps in cold climates, and that they do work in cold climates, we're expecting to see more deployment in those places. Turning to commercial buildings, the picture for space heating looks fairly similar to residential, but with a pretty key difference that where I noted that only, I think it was a maximum of 9% in any region, not using heating. There's with commercial buildings, this is a larger percentage that do not use heating. 17% nationwide do not have heating in their buildings. And that ranges a little bit, but it's generally around that amount. You'll notice some of the things that I talked about with some of the shares I talked about with electricity versus gas and fuel oil in these different regions looks pretty similar. The Northeast, is kind of the one sort of major user of fuel oil for heating. Gas sort of beats out electricity in every region except for the South. And propane actually here is heating the Northeast more than other parts of the country. And actually, just to another thing I want to touch on before I move on is we have statistics on cooling equipment as well. That is just a little too complicated to present in a graph just because there are quite a few more equipment categories. But I do want to note that with commercial buildings, there are even more buildings without cooling equipment. 22% nationwide, and it ranges from as high as 30% in the Midwest, and even 13% of commercial buildings in the South report not having cooling equipment. But returning to heating in commercial buildings, heat pumps generally reflect similar trends to those in residential buildings. South has the largest share at 26%, compared to the national average of 17%. And then followed by the West, the Northeast, and the Midwest, and kind of a similar pattern to what we saw in residential. But a few kind of interesting insights emerge from the types of heat pumps installed in commercial buildings. Air source heat pumps make up the vast majority of heat pumps, as we saw in residential as well. And it's actually even more significant of a difference here in commercial buildings. 92% for commercial buildings compared to 86% for residential buildings. And that is among buildings that have heat pumps. This is obviously not among all buildings. But here, interestingly, ground source heat pumps make up about 10% in the Midwest, which is a very kind of interesting statistic here. And it also makes up about 5% in the Northeast, which is notable particularly. And then here, what is not included in the residential mix is water source heat pumps or water loop heat pumps, making up about 5 to 6% nationwide, which are very which I think is very interesting considering they are a little bit more, they require a little bit more like very specific geographic planning and water resources compared to the ground source heat pumps or the air source heat pumps. So moving on to water heating, let's take a look at the residential water heating mix. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the distribution of fuel sources for water heating is pretty similar to that of space heating. Gas is the primary source for much of the nation, but again, electricity is king in the South. Fuel oil is also used for heating water in 11% of Northeast households, so a little bit smaller of a proportion than we saw for space heating, but still, quite a bit more than we see anywhere else. The 11% in the Northeast is really kind of pulling up that, making up that 2% nationwide that we see here. And then propane is a little bit more evenly distributed here than we see for space heating, for residential or commercial, about 3 to 4% for each region. And then finally, considering residential cooking fuels, we see somewhat of a reversal of the trend in space and water heating, where electricity is actually the dominant fuel for cooking at 53% nationwide to 28% gas. And it actually leads in every region, just barely in the Northeast. But it still is 41% to 39% there. Again, the South has the highest proportion of households cooking with electricity, continuing that trend across all of these categories. Overall, the Northeast is the most dependent on fossil fuels for cooking, with 38% with cooking with gas and 6% with propane and 6% with fuel oil. Again, here a slightly larger percentage with propane or fuel oil than the other regions, although really not significantly. We're seeing more even distribution here among the regions. So what are the major takeaways from this presentation? What are the things that we should be thinking about or understanding from this data and thinking about as we kind of move forward with this and as we expect to get more data in the future? For one thing, we've seen gas is quite dominant as a fuel for space heating and water heating across the US. The South kind of being a bit of an outlier there. But for the most part, it is kind of maintaining a foothold for both of those technologies, both of those services. Second, like heat pumps are most popular in the South, but they're certainly not non-existent elsewhere. They are second or third among homes heating with electricity, and they heat 20% of commercial buildings in the West. Electric cooking, as we just saw, is more prevalent than other fuels, but we do still see quite a bit of fossil fuels for cooking here, and even a little bit of a mix of electricity and gas here when you look at the purple percentage here. And then finally, well, excuse me, they're really not directly comparable because of different uses, different kind of scales of technology, different demands, both for services and also for power or energy. Heat pumps have generally been adopted more quickly and at a larger scale in residential buildings than in commercial buildings. But we will likely see whether this changes when we get later releases from the EIA. A few things that I am expecting to see differently, or I'm expecting may change in the next few years. For one thing, we are expecting to get new releases from the EIA in the next couple of years. They're conducting their residential survey right now, and we are expecting to see data in by 2025, 2026. They kind of roll out a little bit over time. The commercial survey, I believe we're supposed to see an update relatively soon as well. And so I expect to see new information there that will be useful to help understand what the impact has been of the developments in the last few years, whether that is cost developments, technology improvements, policies spreading across states. I also expect to see some new developments as we see particularly new programs standing up across states, and new federal programs as well with federal tax credits that are incentivizing weatherization, insulation, efficiency upgrades, heat pumps for space heating and water heating, induction cooking, all kinds of new things where either improvements to existing state programs or brand new state programs that are standing up under the home energy rebates from the federal government. Those are, of course, just kind of starting to stand up, as I believe only New York and Wisconsin have started up their programs. We've had a few more approvals, and I believe it's about 20 or so states have submitted. Don't quote me on that. I have not. I don't have it in front of me. But the deadline has just passed for states to opt out of the funding, so we should expect to see more applications, to those programs coming up. And then over the next few years, as those programs stand up, I'm really hoping to see more information from the states and from the federal government on how those programs have worked in altering the landscape of space heating, water heating, energy efficiency, and building performance. I also we just saw a survey from the IRS and Treasury Department that analyzed the claims of tax credits for building technologies in the last year. I'm expecting that in the next I'm hoping that we will see more of those in the next few years to help us get a better picture, a better sense of how these tax credits are working at the federal level. And whether we'll see more congressional action, more executive action, et cetera, I don't know. But these are the kinds of things that I think we'll be paying a lot of attention to over the next few years to see, but both feeding into these surveys from EIA and then also kind of coming alongside of that data as those roll out as well. So I want to thank you very much for tuning into this presentation and listening to our our data. If you are interested, I mentioned the Buildings Hub at the beginning of the presentation. Just a quick plug: if you're interested in the Buildings Hub and all of the things that we present, including these kinds of statistics, as well as we do a lot of policy tracking, incentive tracking in terms of what's available. Kind of we spotlight 27 states plus DC. We look at federal programs. We do kind of stories with the data and news sort of related stories. Please check us out at atlasbuildingshub.com. We have various pricing levels for different types of users. But with that, I will hand it back to Brett for if there are any questions. I'm excited for looking forward to a good discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. And real quick before we get into those questions, here we go. Just a real quick reminder that this session is being recorded, and you can head over to our YouTube channel and check that out right now if you want to subscribe, and so you'll get instant access when it is available. Otherwise, it'll be available there in the next couple days to check out the recording if you want to share it. For those of you watching this in the future, not right now, but on demand, take your quiz with an 80% passing rate to receive your continuing ed certification. And for those of you watching this right now, check your spam at certs@gutenbergcerts.com. Over the next couple of days, you'll receive your continuing ed certificate as long as you've been here for the full CU hour. And take the survey that pops up as well, and we'll be putting in, we'll get your AIA numbers from that to submit to AIA for those of you who need AIA. And as a real quick reminder, a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, our we've hit 350 members officially. So thanks to all of you who support us that way. And our top tier sponsors like Rheem, making air source heat pump technology to help expand this, help decarbonization and advanced water heating. So thanks to them and all of our sponsors who allow us to do what we do. So there was I guess I'm curious because, yeah, this data is from 2018 or 2020, at least for the residential. And we know that Maine, and maybe that's been, since that time, right? Maine has been doing massive heat pump push, that I thought they had become perhaps the heat pump capital. And so maybe this data just hasn't caught up to that. I mean, it doesn't look like they kind of showed up there. So somebody noted even that when they were in Maine, anecdotally, they saw, heat pumps all over the place.
Yeah, I will also mention a few months ago we did a conversation with the director of Efficiency Trust Maine. Efficiency Maine Trust, sorry, who shared a lot about their goals, their incentives that they have implemented, their policies, their learnings from all of that work. And there's a lot of really interesting information there where they have, they met their goal, they surpassed it, they pushed, they kind of increased that goal, which is great. They've seen like a lot of success. So I definitely think, particularly speaking to the point that I had made about cold climate heat pumps, really kind of taking off and really kind of proving that they work in these low temperatures. Really, like I do expect that we'll see some of that reflected in the data as well coming up. And another kind of point about that is one of the things that kind of inspired me to mention earlier the radiator question was one thing that they've been doing in Maine a lot is a lot of the heating in Maine is radiator heating. And so they are not ducted. And so they will frequently they install a lot of mini splits because it's much cheaper to retrofit that than it is to add in ducting and put in like central air source heat pumps, which they do that as well, of course. but in general, they have found that the mini splits have been really successful there. And if you're interested in that conversation, it's also on our atlasbuildingshub.com. We have links to all of our Buildings Hub Live is what we call it, discussions.
Um, what you mentioned just a second ago, cold weather climate, and I know that I don't know if we've quite defined. I think we've almost defined it. At least I know the Northeast has been trying to move forward with actually defining it. I think EPA and Energy Star have been trying to define when we say cold weather climate. Does the EIA differentiate and track out of these installs which ones are cold weather climate, or is that something on their to-do list for this next round?
I do not know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think I would be curious to see whether they do because you know it's not a fundamentally a different technology, of course, but it is there are sources or there are places that will kind of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like differentiate um, cold climate heat pumps in their discussions. Um, so I think we'll have to wait and see what they say.
Yeah. Um, and so, as a reminder, everyone, the EIA Energy Information Administration has a lot of other data about the building features and makeup. And we actually use it to power our Green Star home certification program. So when we're trying to determine where we set our energy efficiency thresholds, we base where homes are finding themselves at based on their year to some extent. What the EIA is actually saying their energy consumption is. And so I would imagine we'll be taking a look at 2020 to update, 2025 to make an update. But what I'm getting at with this point, where I'm going with this, is that have you also seen in your data, like, what are the characteristics? So we talked a lot about region in your report. Does it also get into the home's age or the home's measured efficiency in their shell, their weatherization, and whether it's been weatherized or not, or anything like that?
Yeah, a few things that come to mind. They do have quite a bit of information on age, on occupancy, like size, basically. Um, I'm trying to think. I believe square footage. Um, we have some information on because they collect on the uh like essentially like the last time that the um equipment was updated or installed or new equipment was installed or things like that. So one of the things that we feature on the Buildings Hub is a little uh kind of a measure of how long has it been. We're mostly because we're expecting about 15 years, every 15 years or so, it's time, it's ripe for replacing or at least maintaining kind of traditional HVAC equipment. And so a good time for thinking about is this a time that people can replace, swap out let's say their gas furnace for a central air source heat pump or something like that. Kat, are there any kind of other characteristic sort of things that you want to mention, specifically with regards to EIA?
Yeah, so there's a lot that the EIA dives into, like just for residential, we have characteristics in the Buildings Hub about dryer age and fuel, whether or not the home has solar generation capacity, if the home is EVSC or make ready, the age of an HVAC system, whether the home has ever received LIHEAP or any other sort of federal energy assistance. So the data is very, very comprehensive, which makes up for the fact that the survey comes out every 5 years.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you said dryer, because that's one of the things that I was on my mind when you mentioned that cooking was the one device that sort of surpassed all as far as electric, right? I mean, it seemed to pull ahead. But then I was thinking, well, we didn't see any charts like those nice charts you have on our drying equipment. I wonder, does that pull even further ahead, or are what else? What else can be electric that can also be gas? I think that was really the other main one. And so, do you have any sense for where dryers stand on electric versus gas at all, just off the top of your head?
Yes, it does, in fact, pull farther ahead.
Yeah.
The electricity, I have it in front of me. 67% use electric for dryers.
Yeah.
The next largest category is no dryers at 17%. And then gas is
Solar,
15.
those are solar dryers outside.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, gas is only 15%, and then propane is 1%.
Wow. Okay. And do you know if it goes further into whether those are condensing or heat pump dryers, or just is it really just kind of ending on fuel at that point? Or maybe you all don't have it, but do you know if EIA reports the type of dryers?
We do not. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether that is something that they.
Mhm. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, like Kat said, we also, we look at electric vehicle, like we look at also whether they own electric, whether a home owns an electric vehicle, um, uh, LED light bulbs, backup generators, and things like that.
Mhm.
With those, we are not able to go quite as in depth, but these are all, all like things that EIA collects in their surveys that we're able to.
Does it differentiate, types of backup? I mean, obviously, a whole home battery is, one thing versus a methane gas generator is a whole nother thing. Do they split those two apart?
We do not have that surfaced, but
But you
again,
would count a battery as a backup system. I mean, that might be part of the sort of total number, correct?
in this case, I actually don't think that is the case.
Oh, okay. So if someone was looking at that, they're really talking about those backup gas systems then, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Um,
or potentially like yeah. Let me actually, I'd have to get back to you on that because I'm not sure off the top of my head.
yeah. Um, well, we are at our time right now. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. And so I guess just real quick again, remind everybody where they can go to reach out, learn more, find the data, and hopefully, stay on top of the next one that comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the Atlas Buildings Hub, go to atlasbuildingshub.com. We have both information that is publicly available and then information that is available to subscribers. Like I said, if you're interested, we have various pricing tiers for different types of users. We also are happy to give a tour to anyone who is interested if you just reach out. And then for Atlas Public Policy, more broadly, for all the rest of our work as well, including our other hubs like the EV Hub, Climate Program Portal, Water Program Portal, go to atlaspolicy.com. And we'll be keeping an eye out for the next EIA. We're releases, which they publicize on their website. And we'll be incorporating that as soon as we can. We'll be also incorporating more data on our website. We're often updating Buildings Hub, and we'll be incorporating more data kind of continually over the next, well, indefinitely, but certainly over
Yeah.
the next 6 months.
Yeah. And just so you all know, I mean, I've been following some of the newsletters from Atlas Policy, some of the resources you send out to people depending on what state they're in, and if they need additional resources to, um, funding resources, all sorts of things. We get that, such great content, and then just what's happening and going on from an advocacy standpoint to some extent behind the scenes. So I think it's a fantastic resource. I think you should all go there and get signed up and learn more and plug in. So, Stephen and Kat, really appreciate your time. Thanks to Atlas Public Policy for having you out. Maybe we'll hopefully catch you on the next report and see what has changed next time. So, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Be well, and we will catch you at our next session next week. So, goodbye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.